Okay, so I have pleasure in opening the council briefing of the 10th of September 2024 at 6 p.m. and welcome all those who are in attendance. The City of Vincent would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and pay our respects to elders past and present, acknowledging that as the City of Vincent, we have a role to play working towards reconciliation and justice for First Nations people. I don't have any apologies, noting that Councillor Sophie Greer is currently joining us online. And I note that Councillor Jonathan Hallett is already on approved leave of absence from the 1st of September 2024 to the 15th of September 2024. Okay, so now I'm just going to open for public question time. Can I just first get an indication, please, from anyone who is wishing to speak to the meeting? Can I just get an idea? Okay, great. Okay, so we do have people that want to speak. If you haven't been to a briefing here at the City of Vincent before, we ask when you come forward, please state your name and the suburb in which you reside. And because this is a briefing of the agenda in front of us, please identify which item you are speaking to. And you are time limited to 3 minutes. The screen is up there. We apologise we don't have the usual screen that comes down, but we've had a few technical difficulties, so you get to look at the same screen that I'm looking at today. And please don't repeat any points that have already been raised. If you really want to say, I agree with the person that said such, and you can leave it at that, and then you can just add your own points if you want to. Okay, and your summary of your remarks is going to be included in the agenda, and if there's any questions, they'll be able to be followed up as well. So would the first speaker like to come forward? Any order you like. Right, if no one comes forward, I'm going to... All right. Without the microphone. No, sorry, I'll just explain. Thank you very much for coming forward, and the reason we need you to speak in the microphone is because we're recording, okay? Yes, please say your name. Yep.
And into the morning, it is easily audible in my bedrooms. The fully commercial concert venue that he has been running has made an already bad situation much worse, with him celebrating post-performance with musicians and patrons. These celebrations naturally involve both food and alcohol. Mr. Monda and his friends is one thing. Post-performance parties take it to a whole new level. I now regret that I didn't lodge complaints with the council about those many social noisy gatherings over the years. This was partly not to make an enemy of my neighbour, and partly because I wasn't confident that the City of Vincent would listen. Mr. Mondier is effectively trying to drive me and other genuinely residential neighbours out of his high patronage business. The reference to a performance being a session is contrivance. It is then redefined as at least 5 performances with 100 people at each performance over one weekend, or alternatively spread over 2 weekends a month, Friday, Saturday and Sunday night. How can the council say that this is interested in protecting residential amenity when I don't even get respite from noise of 100 people coming and going up twice on Sunday with constant Uber drop-offs and then Ubers idling out front for pickup afterwards. In addition to
Would you
all
be
the
able to-
socialising outside the theatre, Mr. Monday is outside the theatre in Mr. Monday's outer area. Mr. Monday has pushed the envelope at every opportunity, first running a busy home business from his home in a residential zone, and from the time he moved in about 10 years ago with no approval
Would you be able to wrap up your comments, please? You're now over time. Thank you.
Pardon? You don't want to hear the rest?
No, you've actually run out of time.
All right then. Thank you.
But thank you for coming. And I will say you are also welcome to come back next week as well if you have further remarks that you wish to make.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
And we also have got your written statement. And also apologies to you, I didn't see you trying to get up because it was right in front of the podium. So apologise for that. Would I have the next speaker, please? You just need to come forward, please. If you could just come forward. Thanks.
Good evening. My name's Nunzio Mondia. I am the director of Centre Stage Recording Studios. I live in Perth, 6000, and this is in relation to agenda item 5.2.1. I actually wasn't going to get up and talk today because I think Centre Stage and what it's done for the community over its trial period, it just speaks for itself. And I encourage all you guys to really have a look at the documents that I have sent in. Problem with our neighbour here, my neighbour, is that she's not willing to negotiate or have anything
Can I
to
ask
do
that
with
you
anything.
please direct your comments to me? Thank you.
And this is just an ongoing issue. No one else has an issue in the street. And when we went through this pre-trial, I was asked, is there a community demand for this? And we had 400 plus signatures. The entire street signed that they were fined, with the exception of our neighbour here. And we went through a lot of investment to make sure that there's no noise that's travelling outside the studio. There's a lot more noise. We talk about floor noise coming from the park, from sports events, from Hyde Park, from Highgate, pickups, drop-offs. We've got the Brisbane Hotel. It's an area that's growing and we need to be proactive. And if we're to go forward and think more community-minded, this person does not think community-minded because she runs her business on Beaufort Street, accommodation. She runs it out of the back of her home. She runs it down the road. She encourages these people to park in front of her house on the verge. She just cares for herself. It's a very solitude type of approach. It's not community-minded. So please read the documents, have a look at the social media. Please have a look at the community and the people that come into the community. Particularly, please read the Northbridge Common Town Team letter, which does represent the community as a whole. And if we are to be proactive and go forward as a council, and I do believe I read the word courageous, and to be courageous in going forward and coming up with new ideas for the community, then we need to ignore this kind of backward thinking. That's all I'd like to say. And I'm available if anyone wants to come and see the studio for yourself. And you can see it's a world-class facility, and it possesses no noise and nothing. One last comment I'd like to make is that when I first purchased my house, and I've been there longer than 10 years, I've been there for almost 3 decades, and I went to primary school at Highgate, and I've been in the area ever since. I've never left the area. My last comment is when I purchased my home and it was a mixed commercial residential home that I purchased. So everyone has their fights going forward. This is the direction of the future. What you just heard was just backward thinking.
Okay, so thank you very much. I am going to remind people, please, when you are addressing the council, we really do want to hear from people. We want to hear what your thoughts are and the like. But I do ask that you please refrain from any personal attacks on people, on anyone at all. That goes for all of our speakers. Okay, so what we are particularly interested to hear is how people feel particular developments are going to occur, but and the impact it may have. But I do ask that people just simply direct it towards whatever the matter is. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So can I hear from the next speaker, please?
My name's Andrew Pearce. I'm speaking on behalf of Celsius Developments, who are a significant landowner in the town centre. I'm just speaking in relation to agenda item 5.1, which is the establishment of a viewing tower and the DA associated with that. Pursuant to council bylaws, we established the viewing tower earlier this year without the need for a DA, but on the basis that we would subsequently follow up with a development application. We did, however, seek a building permit and were granted a building permit for the viewing tower. It's simply part of an ongoing sales process that we have liaised extensively with council officers on, and at their request, we have written to local residents around the development, advising them of our sales process and the timing that we would establish a viewing tower, that we would establish signage on the site, that we would establish a site office on the site, and the program would be ongoing throughout the balance of this year. It's really quite important that developments of this scale get completed and have to get off the ground. To get off the ground, you need to have a marketing campaign. And our marketing campaign has been very well stepped out, well thought out. And I do want to commend the city's planning officers. They have been very helpful in the process of where to establish a viewing tower on the site. We had a number of site locations that we could have put it. They have recommended a location, and they have also asked us to keep the community informed about the viewing tower. It's situated well away from neighbouring residential properties, and it is in support of an already approved development application on the site that was also recommended by council planning officers. So just wanted to speak in favour of that today. We have written to a number of local residents about the process, and the reason why I wanted to establish it early was because we wanted to afford the local community the ability to go up the viewing tower and see what the development would offer. And we have had huge engagement, it's fair to say, from local residents. I think there's been 200 downloads of the QR code on the site and over 100 expressions of interest to find out more about the development once we formally launch later this year. So just in summary, I would commend you to approve the viewing tower as supported by the planning officers. Thank you.
Sorry, can I just get a suburb from you? Because for the minutes, so we had we had your name, we just need to get the suburb for the minutes.
The suburb where I live?
Yes.
I live in Cottesloe. And we are an
That's
extensive landowner in
No, that's okay. That's all we need. We just need it for the minutes. But thank you very much. Okay, so can we please have the next speaker?
Good evening. Dudley Meyer, Highgate. First item is 5.29 Baker Avenue. I wasn't going to speak, but having heard what I've heard, I just ask you, consider how you'd feel. Would you be happy to have 100 people leaving your neighbour's house at 11 p.m. every Friday night of the year, plus a lot of the Saturday nights? This recommendation's approving 72 4-hour events, finishing possibly at 11 p.m. during the year. It's a residential area. 100 metres away is a suitable venue at the Brisbane Hotel. One of the speakers talked about the Northbridge Common supporting this. It belongs in Northbridge. Also, there was talk about the streets supporting it. I know 3 people in the street. 2 of them are very concerned, but they feel intimidated. It's just their background. It's not someone's intimidated. They just feel intimidated. They don't like processes like this. They don't want it in the area. So that's all I'll say on that. 6.1, stormwater drainage connection. I'm not particularly fussed about stormwater drainage policies, but I am fussed about quality policies, and I'm fussed about treating businesses fairly. I put in a submission and I had some email correspondence with a staff member trying to convince them of the errors of their ways, if you want. I looked through the responses in the report today. There's a response saying the city is looking at getting an educting truck and cleaning the pits regularly. The street sweeper had an induction unit on it. So what happened to that truck? I argued there was no reason to increase the ARI base intervals because the use of intervals rather than absolute values automatically reflects changes in rainfall patterns over time. The response was that increasing intervals is about increasing on-site retention. I think that's a very good response and I would support that. It's just a pity they didn't put it in the original report as a justification. I also asked for justification for the fact that residential lots have to retain 1 in 20 years, whereas commercial have to retain 1 in 100 years. I anticipated what the answers would be. I gave them some responses that I thought they would give, and I gave an argument why they should be the same. The response the staff have come back with is simply capture infiltration on commercial and residential properties reduces pressure and flooding events on the city's drainage and road network infrastructure. That's true, but it doesn't answer the question, which is why commercial properties have to retain more stormwater. It's a greater cost to them. I think just the response demonstrates they don't have an answer. They can't justify it. It's just a tick response answer, hoping no one actually thinks about it. So once again, I ask, and I'd like an answer tonight, why that commercial properties have to retain more water than residential properties. We should all be in the same boat. We should retain more for various, good reasons. But why commercial more? There is no sound argument. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any further speakers? Thank you.
Hello, my name is Nick Mondia and I'm here to speak about Agenda 5.2.1, which is the
And suburb, please.
Perth, where I live, Perth, Lake Street, Perth. Over the last 18 months, we've had the Centre Stage studio on a trial basis, which I've always been there to help and work there when there's a concert or there's something on. We have number limits, so we don't have 100 people attend. We have a limit that we can put in there, so it's generally probably between 60, 70 people, depending on the top and the bottom. I've always been instructed by Nunzio that when people come there, just make sure that parking out the front, and people know that there's parking across the road where the City of Vincent car park is. And I've also been instructed to make sure that there's no antisocial behaviour. Now, a lot of people that come to the concerts, they come, it's at a convenient time, and then when they finish, they go straight out or they go home. The noise that comes from the park, last week there was a concert, and before we even started the concert, the park was full of people because they have the soccer where I think the gay and lesbian people play soccer. So there's always events at the park. There's always people there. So generally the noise, including the cars that go down Beaufort Street, are very loud sometimes. So, and people coming out of the Brisbane. So I just want to just say that whenever we have our events, I'm always there to make sure that no one parks in front of anybody's house, make sure that everybody knows there's parking across the road, and everybody already knows that before they go there. And then I generally go around and have a chat with people in the neighbourhood, people that live on the street, and nobody has had one complaint. We have not had one complaint. So just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak?
Hi, my name's Stephanie. I live at 105 Alma Road. We're directly impacted by the Celsius Tower that is on that property at 367 Fitzgerald Street. I just want to, when you're making these decisions, I want to really clarify the fact that of the submissions, there was 24, 21 people were against this ladder, this stairway to nowhere, because it was overlooking our homes. It's a massive invasion of privacy into my backyard. People from that ladder can directly see into my dining room and to my children's bedrooms. So 87.5% of the people that put in a submission did not want this tower. And then I see that it's been approved. So what percentage does it need to be of residents that don't need this and don't want this over their homes before a decision is not made in the favour of developers? Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak?
All I want to add is that Nicola Burton, Raglan Road, North Perth, directly facing the stairway. I just wonder at what point this developer will actually do things that follow the guidelines put out by the council. And also to comment that I can't be in my backyard without being able to see the top of it. Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak? Okay. All right. So the items that you have spoken on are going to be brought forward on the agenda, and no decisions are made at this briefing. I do remind people, but councillors will have an opportunity to ask administration any questions they have about items on the agenda. So there being no further questions, I close public question time at 6:21. Okay, Governance Manager, can you confirm if any statements have been received?
I can confirm that we received a written statement from Frances Hopkins of Perth in relation to item 5.1, where questions were raised in that item, that submission. They will be answered in the briefing notes.
CEO, do you have any declarations of interest?
Through you, Mayor Zaman, declarations of interest have been received as follows. The first from Councillor Warner, an impartiality interest in relation to item 5.2, number 9 Baker Avenue, change of use from single house to single house and unlisted use. Extended interest being that Councillor Warner is acquainted with the applicant and has helped arrange events in the space and has attended events in the space. The next declaration is from yourself, Mayor Zaman, impartiality interest in relation to item 6.3, and then impartiality interest in relation to 6.4. Both related to Sullivan Logistics Stadium sports floodlighting upgrade and playing service redevelopment, noting that the interest is that Mayor Zaman is a member of the East Perth Football Club. That's all that I've received.
Thank you. So now I'm just going to go around councillors to see which other items you wish to ask questions about. Councillor Warner.
I make a declaration of interest as well. Thanks.
Beg your pardon. Yes, certainly, Councillor Wallace. Sorry about that.
Apologies for the lateness of this one. Yeah, I'd just like to declare a financial interest in item 5.4 as my home's on the Municipal Heritage Inventory. Thanks.
And are there any other declarations of interest that anyone wishes to have to give? Councillor Alexander.
Well, I'm not sure. Our place is heritage listed, so. And I think you already know that, so.
Thank you. So yes, I think that we will note that declaration of interest. Yes, I've noticed that both yourself and Councillor Wallace are very diligent at declaring that when issues of heritage come up. So we've got that. Are there any further declarations of interest? Okay, now I will move around to the councillors to find out what other items you wish to speak to. Councillor Warner.
5.3 and 8.1.
Councillor Wallace.
No, thank you, members.
Councillor LaFontaine.
No, thank you, Mayor Zaman.
Councillor Castle. Councillor Greer.
Nothing further. Thanks, Mayor Zaman.
Okay. Councillor Alexander. Councillor Wolf.
5.4, please.
Okay, and I also want to raise 6.3 and 6.4. Okay, so the first item is 5.2, number 9 Baker Avenue, Perth, change of use from single house to single house and unlisted use. Okay, so open to any questions. Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Ms. Amon. I just have a couple of questions around the conditions that are being proposed. I'll say that the calculation of the number of events seems overly complicated. So I'm just wondering if we could have an explanation about why it's structured this way, as opposed to just setting a maximum number of events or sessions per month.
Through you, Ms. Amon, we can provide some greater detail in the briefing notes. Essentially, my understanding as to why this is preferred over a maximum events is due to specific, how the applicant essentially wants to run each event. So their session periods to make sure that they run over, it was previously 1 weekend per month. Now it will be 2 consecutive weekends per month. So it's to give some flexibility while also providing some structure around how many events there are per month and operating hours. So, but we can break it down in the briefing notes further.
That would be great. I guess it's understanding if it's the difference just between number of events per month and how they might be spaced across a month. Sounds like that might be part of the consideration. Has the applicant given any, and apologies if I've missed this in the report, any justification for why the hours are requested to be extended and the number of patrons?
Through you, Ms. Amon, the additional 1 hour is to provide a little bit of flexibility in the operation. So generally the applicant had advised that generally they do finish by 10 p.m, but it just gives them a bit of flexibility if they want an encore or if they need to extend beyond 10 p.m. for scheduling reasons. In terms of the capacity numbers, I don't believe we have that on hand, so we can get some information from the applicant and pop that in the briefing notes.
Thank you. And I'm just wondering if in situations like this where we've had an initial trial, for example, a time-limited approval, and now the applicant is seeking that approval in perpetuity, is that the common practice for us? Trying to remember myself, or have we had situations where we might have approved a further time-limited period before actually committing to a permanent approval?
Through you, Ms. Amon, yes. So generally when we apply the time limited approval, it is that test period to make sure that I guess the applicant is able to facilitate the land use in accordance with conditions of approval, and particularly where there's some reliance or heavy reliance on management measures. So in this instance, they've facilitated the approval for 18 months in accordance with the previous conditions of approval, based on our assessment and the fact that we hadn't received any complaints throughout the 18 months. We were satisfied that it is in a position for it to be approved in perpetuity. But this is probably a little bit of a different consideration as well, given they are also seeking to modify a number of those conditions, which facilitates an increase in the intensity. Based on our assessment and that demonstrated management of the use, we're satisfied that it's able to be considered in perpetuity still with that increased intensity, and that's due to the acoustic measures, the management measures, and the previous operation as well. That it's able to be approved in perpetuity, but it would be reasonable to consider a further time limited approval if that was of the mind of council.
Thank you. Can I also ask, there's been some comments in the chamber about complaints not being made in this situation. Can you confirm there haven't been any complaints registered with the city?
Ms. Amon, we don't have any registered complaints throughout the operation, no.
Thank you. Nonetheless, I suppose we'll have some evidence of the impact from residents and feedback through this process. I had one more question, which I need to find. No, I can't find it. If I think of it, I'll email you through the week. Thank you.
Councillor Alexander.
I've got a number of questions. I note that we've all received through our emails public questions and statements from a Francis Hopkins of Perth. I would like to see the answers to those questions before next Tuesday, if we could, please.
Councillor Alexander, I can confirm that they are included in the agenda and answers will be supplied for before the next meeting.
Okay, and I also note, to back up what Councillor Castle has said, there was comments made that, you know, the entire street supports, you know, events and etc. I'd like to see some evidence of that, as opposed to just statements being made. I'd like to see it backed up with some evidence. So if we're to believe any of the comments, you know, they need to be verified, not just enunciated. Thanks.
Are there any further questions from any councillors in relation to this item? Councillor Warner.
Thank you. Whilst I know that we'll get more information based on those questions that we were sent late this afternoon, I just, off the top of your head, are you able to say, is the space compliant for the use it's been used for in terms of toilets and the other management plans, and has it been compliant with liquor licensing to date?
Through you, Mayor Simon. So yes, it has received public building approval that sets capacity limits, and a toilet assessment was completed at the time. So it does comply in that respect, and would also continue to comply. They would just need to get a revised certificate or approval from the city if council were to approve the increase in occupancy numbers, noting that the toilets would remain to comply if we were to increase the daytime operation to 80 people. In terms of the liquor licensing, so we don't have any record of issuing a Section 39 or Section 40 to the Department of Racing, Gaming, Liquor for a liquor license to be issued, nor had we received any comments or complaints from either community or the applicant who's seeking a liquor license. But that's essentially managed and issued by Racing, Gaming, Liquors. So any concerns would need to be directed through to them, as they would also issue a liquor license if it was applied for.
Thank you. So just double checking. So from what you've got in front of you, you haven't had any registered complaints and you haven't seen any real issues with non-compliancy?
Through you, Mayor Simon, it hasn't been brought to our attention, no. Sorry, I'll just add though that we will, however, review the comments within the statement and provide a response.
Councillor Alexander.
We've had complaints tonight. Ladies stood up and complained. So you didn't hear that?
Through you, Mayor Simon, so we'll conduct a review of the comments provided by Francis and include them in the briefing notes.
Councillor Lafontaine.
Thank you, Mayor Simon. I was just wondering if the city had received any registered complaints throughout the trial period regarding parking from residents on the street or availability of on-street parking?
As I'm on, the city does have record of complaints around illegal car parking along Baker Avenue over a duration. We can confirm this through briefing notes, but I'll note that in my review of those, it didn't specify being associated with this particular use, so that would need to be better understood in terms of on what basis were people illegally parking and is it associated with this function.
Thank you.
Yeah, just through your Mayor Simon to add that Baker Avenue is quite high capacity for school drop-off and pick-up, obviously associated with Hargate Primary, and also there's a lot of car parking around major events, sporting events and music events at HBF Park, where people will park anywhere from the Brisbane Street Hotel or around, and it's a very short walk down to HBF Park from Birdwood Square.
Councillor Castle.
Sorry, I remembered my last question. It was in relation to the service of alcohol. I understand that there isn't a liquor licence or record of a liquor licence, and it's not part of the approval for them to serve alcohol at this venue, but we have heard some comments that that is happening. Can I just confirm that according to the existing approval, they're not entitled to sell alcohol? And does this also apply to service of alcohol?
Through Mayor Zaman, there's no conditions on the approval that specifically relate to sale of food and alcohol, but we can provide some additional information in the briefing notes.
Thank you. And while you're there, if you could also outline in the briefing notes what measures are in place or proposed to be in place to control the comings and goings of patrons and the noise associated with that. Thank you.
Councillor Greer, you indicated you wanted to speak.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Zaman. Just one question about the increase to venue capacity between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. from 40 to 80 people. Just want to check I have the correct understanding that we're not proposing any restrictions to the number of events that can take place between 9 to 5 Monday to Saturday. The number of events is aimed at the Friday to Sunday period. Is that correct?
Through you, Mayor Zaman, that's correct.
Thank you. That's it from me.
Are there any further questions from any of the councillors? Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Ms. Amon. I've got quite an abstract one. Hopefully I can explain this correctly. The questions around the comments in the report of the existing sources of noise and activity around the site. So as I understand it, the report saying, this isn't Sleepy Hollow, this is a vibrant part of town. It's different to a standard residential area. And in that way, a little bit of noise is accepted. And I guess in this one, we're primarily talking about the comings and goings, noting the insulation of the music itself. Whereas I recall previous applications that we've had in different contexts where we've talked about other sources of noise, such as community sport. And we're saying that, because there is existing noise, we don't then want to add on top of that. So I'm wondering if the difference between those sort of circumstances is the context of the site being sort of a vibrant inner city area versus a standard residential zone. Thanks.
Through you, Mayor Zaman, yes, that's one of the key differences compared to potentially other similar ones that we've received previously. It's considering the location of the park and the events that are facilitated in the park, but also other entertainment and live music venues in the surrounding area, as well as the traffic experienced on Beaufort Street and Bulwer Street and the proximity to other commercial premises surrounding the site. So that is one consideration in the acceptability of this particular use in this context. In addition to the noise mitigation measures, the design of the building and the acoustic modelling that has also supported the use.
Okay, are there any further questions from any councillors in relation to this item? Councillor Wallace.
Just a quick one, thanks, Mayor Zaman. I think a large part of the complaint was about the use of outdoor spaces after performances. Do you think that is appropriately managed for by condition 2.6, which requires everyone to leave immediately after? I guess how does it butt up against, given it's a residential place as well, use of the space after hours in accordance with residential purposes?
Through you, Mayor Zaman, yes. So condition 2.6 seeks for all patrons to leave immediately after the performance concludes. So that's leaving the premise directly to their car, and they should not be loitering in that outdoor space. So that would be a breach to the conditions of approval. And if that was to occur consistently, we would look at undertaking a compliance review.
Okay, are there any further questions from any councillors? Okay, so the answers to those questions and also the ones that have been put will be in the agenda for the next meeting. Okay, so move on to the next item, which is 5.1, numbers 367 and 369 Fitzgerald Street, North Perth, proposed commercial development, viewing tower and associated fencing. Okay, are there any questions? Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Ms. Amon. I've got 3 questions on this one, please. Firstly, I think there have been a lot of questions within the community and on social media for months and months now about whether or not this development has been authorised and was authorised. So for any of those residents that haven't had the opportunity to go through the detail of the report, I thought tonight might just be a useful opportunity to touch briefly on that question about whether or not it's an authorised development.
Through you, Ms. Amon. So yeah, I can confirm that the viewing platform and associated surrounding fencing was lawfully constructed in accordance with planning and building legislation. In terms of the planning, we have a 3-month exemption under our planning exemption policy where conditions are met for viewing platforms to exist on site for 3 months after the date of which the building permit is issued. So at the time that the building permit was issued, we undertook an assessment against those conditions within our planning exemptions policy, and the building permit was then issued. The viewing platform was constructed in accordance with those approved building permit plans and in accordance with the conditions that we assessed under our planning exemption policy. And the applicant submitted lodged a DA to extend that period beyond the 3 months pretty much on the date that the construction was completed. Yes, that's correct. So they did follow due process. Essentially, the reason why the structure is now considered unauthorised is due to the time frame of the DA processing, and because we haven't determined the application within that initial 3-month period of when the building permit was issued. So the applicant did follow due process, but we are just outside of that 3-month period at the moment.
Thank you very much. My second question was, we heard from the public gallery from Stephanie tonight around concerns on impact to visual privacy, and that people standing on top of the viewing platform could see directly into the home's bedroom and dining room. Are there any comments you could make, please, around impact on visual privacy? Thank you.
Yes, so through you, Ms. Amon, we did undertake that assessment when the proposal was initially submitted at the building permit stage. Ultimately, the viewing tower is set back 46-ish metres from the nearest residential property and even greater to those properties' windows and outdoor living areas. Ultimately, given the purpose of the structure and those large setbacks, we considered that it ensured that there would not be adverse overlooking impacts to those surrounding properties, particularly as people using the platform would also be using it for short periods of time and looking at the views associated with the sale of the apartments. And given that we've got a time limited approval as well, it's not for extended periods of time in terms of people using the platform and for the approval.
Thank you. The last issue I just wanted to touch on was the antisocial behaviour issue. So definitely hearing from residents that there are ongoing antisocial behaviour issues even after the fence going up. So things like graffiti, disturbances, trespassing, even people having a picnic on top of the viewing platform. So I just wanted to request, please, that in the briefing that we get an overview of what those antisocial behaviour issues have been at the site, what's been done to address them, and whether or not the city understands that those issues are still ongoing. That'd be really helpful. Thanks.
Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor. I have some questions around the variations in the table on page 15. There's a note of the building height where the acceptable outcome is 4 stories, but the viewing platform is 6 stories or 20 metres. In considering that variation, are we bound by the development application that's already approved for 6 stories or higher in the area, or is that just a consideration in the variation?
Through you, Mayor Zaman, you're not bound by it, no. It's a consideration of the proposed height of this structure against the relevant local housing objectives. It is just a consideration that we've had in regards to considering the acceptability of the height of this structure, is that the approved redevelopment sits at a similar, if not higher height in this location.
Thank you. And I suppose in the same in relation to the overlooking, is it a consideration in the assessment of this application that the impact, whether by height or overlooking, is the same or no greater than what is already approved in the development application? Is that something that you take or that we should take into consideration?
Through you, Mayor Zaman, similarly, yes and no. We haven't specifically had that consideration given the use of this structure is different to the approved development. So we've just considered the use and purpose and function of this structure and its setback to adjoining properties. But yes, it is a relevant consideration that the mixed-use development does propose windows, balconies that sit a lot closer to that right-of-way boundary or residential properties.
Thank you. And I have a question in relation to the fencing. Happy for this to be addressed in the briefing notes, just that the variation being sought is from essentially visually permeable to visually impermeable. I imagine that intersects with Councillor Wolf's question around antisocial behaviour. So just looking for a bit more guidance on why administration thinks that impermeable fencing and that provide opportunities for concealment is acceptable in this regard. And I think that is it for me. Thanks.
Okay, are there any further questions from any of the councillors? Okay, so we'll get the answers to those questions in the upcoming briefing. Okay, so now I move on to 6.1, outcome of advertising and adoption of stormwater drainage connections policy. Councillor Warner.
Thank you. Just following up with a couple of questions from the gallery. Why do businesses need to retain more water than residential properties?
Thank you. Through the chair, just a quick clarification on the policy. All properties should be containing stormwater generated from their property on site. That's the rule, and connections to the city's stormwater drainage system would be only in exceptional circumstances where that might not be effectively managed due to geotechnical or hydrological reasons. In respect to commercial development, that includes mixed use and multi-unit development. So all of those would need to comply with the 1 in 100 scenario, which is the greater the incidence of a larger flooding event, stormwater flooding event. Residential will generally be single residential new development, and it's felt that those developments have a greater opportunity to be able to manage stormwater on site because of green space and the like, and it's considered that a 1 in 20 would be appropriate in that space.
Thank you very much. And another question, what happened to the truck?
Thank you. We still do have a street sweeper. It has limited adduction capability. The truck that is proposed is a purpose-built specific vehicle for adducting drainage. It will have the capacity to jet water, clear drains as well. And hopefully, I believe we'll be looking at cameras so we can actually look at recording conditions of pipes and like. So it's a specific purpose vehicle to manage 8,000 drainage pits within the city.
Okay, are there any further questions in relation to this item? Councillor Wallace.
Thanks, Mayor Zaman. I just had a question about the feasibility, I guess, of this storage of 1 in 100 on site. I was wondering if admin could, in the briefing notes, just do a little case study of a 1,000 square metre commercial lot what the storage capacity would be required for a 1 in 100 on site, and a little assessment of the financial cost of that imposition as well.
Through the chair, we can do that in the briefing note. And just as a side comment, we are in the process of developing an online drainage calculator, which proponents, both residential and commercial, can go on site and calculate what might be required generally in respect to their site.
Yeah, cool. I just found Town of Cottesloe's ones. It looks pretty good.
Are there any further questions in relation to this item? Okay, so now we'll move on to the next item, which is 5.3, advertising of draft Auckland Street character area guidelines. Councillor Warner.
Thank you. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this was sort of evolved as part of how do I put this? There were tensions in the street, and I think this sort of evolved from that as part of wanting to retain what they had and to restrict other things. I was just wondering if we think the sentiment might have changed now that that situation has been resolved. Have we really? Is this still something that the community is looking for, given that the cause of the tension is no longer there?
Through you, Ms. Amon, so at the time of the nomination that was received in July last year, there was 66% of the landowners of the area that supported the nomination process. That then triggered administration to look at preparing draft guidelines, and so through the engagement with the local residents as part of that process, I guess there was a drop-off in support. So I think there was only 14 of the residents that responded to the survey that we did, and it was mixed, so 50-50 were for it and 50% were against it as well. So yeah, hard to draw a conclusion out of that.
Thank you. I was just wondering if it was maybe worth us re-surveying or something to see if it was actually still something that they wanted to have on their agenda, but I appreciate it. Thank you.
Councillor Castle.
Thank you. I had probably similar questions to Councillor Warner, but I suppose that's what this process will show us. I just wanted to chat about numbers. So, and apologies if you've got this in the report and I haven't found it. The first nomination was supported by 66%, which is 26. Is 26 landowners equal to 66%? I suppose my ultimate question is how many total landowners are on the street, so that when we're looking at 66%, 26 landowners, 14 landowners, getting a sense of how many people on the street that actually represents.
Through Ms. Amon, yes, so there's 40 landowners on the street.
Okay, so yeah, I suppose, well, I'll talk to this next week. That's really my questions, is around do we have a threshold for this stage of the process where we will continue to seek community consultation on a draft set of guidelines? We have that threshold at the beginning of the process for it to be considered. Those thresholds, or do different thresholds still apply throughout the process? Is there a point at which you'd go abandon ship?
Through your Ms. Amon, so the only threshold exists at the beginning, which is at 40%. I guess it would be open to council next week to form a view that it doesn't want to progress with the character area guidelines based on the feedback and responses to date, but that would be something to consider for next week.
And just a question around how we will go about engaging with the local residents, given that it is a discrete number of people. What plans do you have to make sure that we try and get a response from all 40?
Through your Ms. Amon, so in accordance with our stakeholder engagement policy, we would write to the owners and occupiers in the character area nominations. So that would capture the 40 landowners, and we'll continue to work with the working group as well as we move through the next stage.
Councillor Warner.
Sorry, another question. We're saying 40 landowners. Was that at the start? Because there's been a few properties that have dropped off because from the corner blocks, etc. So are we actually now down to mid-30s as opposed to 40?
Through you, Mesamon, so with the original nomination included the two properties at the northern end, so 31 Gill Street and 80 Auckland Street, and also one down the south that was 44 Hobart. So that 40 number of landowners was based on that whole area.
Are there any further questions in relation to this item? Okay, so moving on to the next item is 5.4, outcome of advertising and adoption of local planning policy development guidelines for heritage places. Okay, so I've been advised that Councillor Alexander and Councillor Wallace are required to leave the chamber for this item. We will make sure that you are called as soon as we've dealt with this. Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Mesamon. This topic is very dense. I'm not just saying that because I now know the word facadism. I did have a look at some of the other councils across Australia and their policies, and it's something that I think a lot of councils are struggling to communicate. So my question is, what support might be offered to residents in navigating and understanding the policy? So, for example, would it be up on the website with a phone number to call and an option to talk it through with a planner? Thanks.
Through Mesamon, yes, facadism is a new term for a few people, I think. So during the consultation, we received feedback from the community that it was a little hard to navigate. So one of the changes that we made was to include some diagrams to give a bit of a visual representation of what the policy was trying to achieve. But as with any other policy, if people are unclear, there's certainly an option to call up the city and speak to the planning team, and we can talk them through what they can and can't do and guide them through the process.
Thank you. So just to clarify, it would be sort of the same as per anything else where they just have the option to call through the main number and be directed with their question. Thank you.
Are there any further questions in relation to this item? Okay, Governance Manager, could you please bring Councillor Wolf and Councillor Alexander back in? Thank you. Okay, so now we move to item 6.3, Sullivan Logistics Oval Sports Floodlighting Upgrade. Now, I had some questions, but does anyone else have any questions before I ask one? Okay, so the main question I want to ask is about the issue of the reliance on Western Power to meet their end of the deal for the upgrades. Can you please give an indication of what is the expected time frame before we know whether Western Power are going to come to the party?
Through you, Mayor Zamon, we are currently in consultation with Western Power. One of our engineers is working with them to understand that time frame at the moment. So hopefully in the next week or two, we'll have an indication as to whether they can move forward at the speed we want to move forward. And then we can escalate our advocacy in line with that.
Okay, so noting that the timeframes that we're trying to operate to is for the men's waffle season next year so that we can get the fixtures sorted. And 1,000 lux is going to make the difference between night games that can be televised or otherwise. What's the absolute latest that we can have Western Power undertake the upgrades?
Through you, Mayor Zamon, the upgrades, I believe, I have to get this corrected, but if we get the upgrades in March, we'll be good for the season. Otherwise, we'll be running at 500 lux rather than 1,000 lux.
Okay, so I'm just trying to understand this because I know we need to have the lights ready by March for the beginning of the season. What I'm trying to figure out is the latest that Western Power can meet their end in order to be able to ensure that we can do the 1,000 lux by March.
Yeah, I'll have to get back to you on that one. So we'll provide some details in the briefing notes around where we're at to with that, and try to get some concrete dates for you as best we can at this stage of the process.
Okay, but we're expecting to get some idea of what they're saying the timeframe will be within the next fortnight.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, are there any other questions in relation to this item? Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Mayor Zamon. Just a question of clarification. In the report, we've got page 251. It says the submission proposes a slightly less stringent maintenance factor in the lighting design. And then it talks about the testing annually at no cost to the city. I was just hoping we could expand a little bit on that paragraph and what the intention is behind it.
You, Mayor Zamon, yes, we'll provide some further updates that we've received from the consultant and from the preferred contractor in the briefing notes.
Thank you. That was all.
Okay, are there any further questions in relation to the lights upgrade? Okay, so now we'll move on to the next item, which is 6.4 Sullivan Logistics Oval Playing Service redevelopment. I had some questions. Do any other councillors have any questions pertaining to this item? Okay, so my questions were about this. Is obviously this is quite a significant investment in the turf to make sure that it's going to be appropriate for a hopefully Premier Tier 2 oval. I'm mindful that the council passed a policy earlier on in this term about having other events at the oval that were not sporting related. Can you please come back with some information for the next council meeting that is going to give some indication about what measures we need to be considering to ensure the ongoing protection of the turf? Because I'm just mindful that as events come forward, we need to make sure that whatever is being proposed is compatible with the principal purpose of the oval, which is as a sporting ground.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Zamon, yes, we can work with the events team and get you some information on that. Okay,
So I'm specifically after what additional measures may need to be employed now over and above the measures that we we talked about in very general terms with the policy, because the situation has now changed now that we've got this major investment in the oval for sporting purposes.
Yes, through you, Mayor Zamon, we certainly don't want to be ruining what we're putting down there. So we will work with the events team and bring something back to council in terms of recommendations about what can be run on that oval once we have completed these works to ensure the longevity of that field for the purpose that it's actually built for.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions in relation to this item from any of the councillors? Okay, thank you very much. And so we move on to the final item for questions, which is consideration of authorisations associated with land management. That's 8.1. So, Councillor Warner, you had some questions.
Yeah, I did. Basically, can someone just clarify this for me? What the caveat was there for? I've got something here about it. Right to mines of coal or other minerals being excluded from the portion of the said land. What exactly does that mean? Why was that imposed, and why is it being? What will be the difference? What will happen now if it is lifted?
Through the Mayor, so the caveat related to the site previously forming part of a tip and the potential for subsidence to occur in that area. A number of sites in that area had a similar caveat, and it basically indemnified previously the City of Perth and then the City of Vincent against any claims of subsidence to any structures that were built on that land. The removal of the caveat doesn't waive that requirement. So the indemnification against the city remains regardless of whether we remove the caveat. It just means that it frees up the land and the title. So if they want to obtain finance or borrowings, there's not the limitation on there from the caveat.
Thank you. That was the historical context I was missing. Thank you very much.
Councillor Castle.
Thank you. I have a question about the delegation. I'm just wondering if in the briefing notes we could be provided with some examples of when this delegation would be used if it's granted to the CEO, or where these items have come to council. And also a minor point, is there a typo in 2.2 or is that a new word I need to learn?
Through the Chair, yes, we can provide some examples of where we currently exercise this delegation. And yes, that was a typo that I thought I had fixed on the public agenda, but not on Docs on Tap.
We've already learnt one new word this briefing. That's enough.
Are there any further questions in relation to Councillor Wallace?
Thanks, Ms. Amon. I was reading through the Local Government Act, my favourite thing to do on the weekend. There's a definition of property in there which says includes whole or part of the interest of a local government in property. I was just wondering if caveats and easements such as this would be considered an interest of the local government in property, and therefore if the disposing of property sections of the Local Government Act apply, and therefore if this action is appropriate, and if it's appropriate to delegate authority to do that from council to the CEO. Also waiting on David to raise an item that removes a delegation rather than add one as well, one of these days.
I'll take that last comment as a comment. Okay, so Governance Manager, are you able to answer that now, or do you want to include that in the minutes for the next meeting?
Through the Chair, we'll probably need to get some legal advice on that because we have been going around in circles about this delegation. So we will try and get some advice before the briefing notes go out on Friday.
Okay, are there any further questions in relation to this item? Okay, so I thank the public and the live stream viewers and I close the meeting at 7:08. You can stop the viewing. Thank you.